Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to the next episode of the Web Piano Teacher Podcast. I have today with me my good friend, Josh Hammond. He's a Waco piano tuner, and we're going to talk about piano tuning today and all things related to piano tuning and some other stuff. It's going to be great. Well, Josh, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you.
Good. Can I get you to put your mic like right up on your lips almost?
Yeah, I can do that.
There we go. That's much better. Okay, awesome. So, piano tuning. Obviously, I don't need a piano tuner for my electronic keyboard here.
Right. Not unless it were an old analog, right?
Have you ever had anybody call you to tune electric piano? That happens once in a while.
I've had questions on it. Can they be tuned? And I mean, if you have your stage pianos like the Nord pianos, of course, at that point you can detune them, which I think is kind of funny. But not unless it's one of those old synthesizers, but I don't think it's quite the same thing.
Yeah. So we're talking. I have an acoustic. I have this. This is just for in here for doing lessons, recording for my website, and then I have Kauai. We should have looked at it. We'll look at it later, maybe. That I love in the living room there, and that of course needs tuning. And I tune it myself.
Oh,
it takes me
fun.
like 4 hours or more because I'm not an expert. I know how to do it, but I'm not quick at it. But it is a laborious process, tedious.
Yes.
Especially when you get really high and then really low. Yes. I notice the middle is not as hard. And it really seems like, you just a little bit, and it's off. It's hard, right? Isn't that true?
Yes.
But you are a piano tuner in the Waco area. So how far I know you do Waco. Do you do surrounding areas? You go out farther
for sure.
than that?
Yeah, and so I actually grew up in the Marble Falls area. So there's a couple clients that I have out in Marble Falls. But in general, like I don't charge any mileage fee up to 30 miles beyond. And oftentimes I'll even waive the mileage fee depending on like what type of service people need. So a couple people in Dallas, like I will travel.
Oh, really?
I will travel that far. It makes a little bit more sense if you have a couple that you can stack. But but so generally I'm trying to focus on the 30 miles around Waco.
Sure. Now I know already just from hearing you say that you do a good job, and I know that personally, but from what you just said, I know because people will not pay someone to come from another city. That the only reason to do that is if somebody's really good. That's right. And there is a difference between, all piano tuners aren't the same. I've come across that in my life. But the fact that someone's willing to pay you to go to Dallas or Marble Falls, and Marble Falls is beautiful, by the way. Why'd you come here? It's so beautiful there.
Church.
Okay, that's a good reason. It's beautiful. I love going through Marble Falls. What's that place to eat everybody goes to?
The Blue Bonnet Cafe.
Yes. Oh, and the pies. Everybody, if you're from Waco surrounding area, you know about the pies there at Blue Bonnet Cafe. Anyway, my wife's going there tomorrow. I'll go to the dentist, and I think she likes the trip. I think that's half the fun for her, is to go to Marble Falls.
Not too far.
But the fact that you will travel and that people will pay you to do that is a testament to itself that you're good at it. And we're going to give you information later on how to have Josh tune your piano if you're Waco and surrounding area. I mean, if you had enough money, he might let you fly you somewhere.
There we go.
Yeah, that'd be something. That probably happens. But anyway, how did you get into piano tuning? Did you take music lessons as a kid? I mean, usually people who tune pianos had some musical upbringing. How did that go for you?
Yeah, no. So maybe I'm trying to think how long I should make this answer. We won't go way back, but
okay.
I had music as a kid, and then let me turn that phone over. It's going to distract me. So got into music, and then started to get more heavily into music in high school. Would play for like the judges piano guild, where you do your 10-piece sets and whatnot. After a couple of years of doing that, I discovered, I'm like, you know what? I'm on a track to go into piano performance.
Okay.
Started asking different professionals about it, and I'm like, I don't think this is for me. I was starting to get burnt out, but I wanted to stay close to music. And one day I just had the thought, I was like, what if I pick up a trade? What if that's piano tuning? I was like, maybe I'll play some nice pianos if I know how to tune them. And so that was like the single little thought that kind of set me on the journey. And then at our church on the praise team, there's one woman, Cookie Puckett.
Yeah.
She's been there for years, and she knew a tuner. And so she gave me the contact, and then that's how that journey started. Then here in Waco, met James Geiger. He's 89 now, and he's still going strong.
Okay.
Everyone's saying, don't move the pianos anymore. No. I'm talking to you, Jim. But so that's kind of how I got into it. It was like, this is a trade. Wasn't 100% sure about if I would do college or not after that. So that I was like, well, let's go the piano tuning route and get a trade, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah.
So that's the initial getting into it. And it hasn't really been until half a year ago that I've started to make a face for the business, although I've tuned for probably, depending on the year, 20 or 30 clients, over the last decade.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Oh, cool. So I didn't know you went that far in performance. So what's the most difficult piece you got up to? Did you play some Beethoven sonatas or Chopin etudes or anything like that? Or?
Yeah, so like I was playing like the Pathétique, the first two movements of the Pathétique, and then also like I don't remember the etude, if that's how you say it.
Yeah.
But like the Revolutionary Chopin.
Okay, all right,
that,
the
that
left
kind of
hand.
stuff. Yeah, the left hand going crazy. But then I found, because I've written some music too.
Okay.
And I have a ton of starts to things that need to be finished. But, it's like once I exited the let's practice 4 hours a day mode,
yeah.
I was like, I better start working. I'm going to need to make money. So it's been for the past, 15 years. I'm like, okay, maybe one day I'll get a little bit more into it. So slowly trying to get more into the music composition scene.
Neat.
But
here's another reason I like you as a tuner, and that is you actually play, and you have played. I've met some tuners who don't really play. And to me, that's like a mechanic who doesn't ever drive a car. It doesn't really matter to you as much as someone who has music in their soul, who's been brought up with music. It just seems to matter more to someone who actually plays, to me. So, but there are tuners out there who don't really play. They can, they can play the beginning of something, but they're not real, musicians. So I like that you're an actual musician. That would matter to me. I have some things I didn't want to forget to ask. So how long have you been tuning pianos?
The journey started in 2008, and I remember the family. The last name's Maizanos. If you ever see this, thank you for allowing me to tune your piano. I took 6 hours.
Okay, that's how you do a good job.
That's how you do a good job. And I was like, well, here we go. Now, in retrospect, their piano had very tight tuning pins.
Okay,
and so that wasn't helping me out any.
Yeah, you had to really.
Right.
Yeah, I had a piano one time that had loose, and it won't ever stay.
Yes.
That's very frustrating. So seven, that's about 17 years, right? Something like that.
So yeah, and definitely not like the accelerated path, but more of like, let's learn a little bit more about this.
Yeah.
And probably, I don't know, probably 10 years ago was about when I started getting to that 10, 15, clients that I kept up with. And
Sure.
Slowly, just because I also do video production, so it's kind of been the bounce back between that and this. And I realized last year, I'm like, tuning's not going away. Let's invest in it.
Yes. Now I want to ask you this. This seems like a funny question, but some people never get their pianos tuned. And they may do it, once every 10 years or something like that. I have my own answer for this, being a musician, but I wanted to hear what you would say. What's wrong with that? What's the drawback? What are you missing out on by not having your piano to just kind of letting it, sound like it does and never having it tuned?
Yeah, what's the drawback? Well, you could go a lot of different ways with that. What I generally tell people when I'm at their house is I say, what is your standard for music? Like, what are your goals? In an ideal world, and I say that, a performance piano for an orchestra, they tune it before every performance.
Sure.
So that's weekly. Myself, I would be content more than likely to have a piano tuned 3 to 4 times a year, so long as it's, a good piano. If I have time, I probably tune mine twice a year. Right. But I mean, the notes aren't going to sound like you want them to sound,
Yeah.
And so trying to figure out, it's a little bit easier being in front of someone to say, okay, well, what are you going for? But generally, like when you hear our before and after, you're like, oh, wow.
Yeah.
This is what I've been missing. So it can be hard to convey in an extreme case, the difference. But in most cases, what serves most people well is when you say, let's have an incremental path of let's make this better.
Yeah.
But then teachers I've heard will go into, it's like, well, your ear training, and that's true too. But yeah, I don't have a simple answer for it. That's kind of like the answer of let me tell you a little bit. Let's walk through this to see if we can, realize together the benefit of tuning.
Yeah. For me, it's just one is these people, that never have it. I don't want to say these people, but if you never have it tuned, 10 years, you don't. you're someone who plays, you don't realize how bad it sounds
Yeah.
until you hear it in tune.
Yeah.
And it makes your experience much better if it is in
Right.
tune. You enjoy it more and you want to do
Yeah.
it more. And you don't really realize that until, like you said, you compare. You have it tuned as opposed to it not being in tune. And you go, oh, wow, you don't know what you're missing until you see what you were missing.
Right. And one thing I say on my website, which is probably a little bit too poetic and not clear enough, but that's the artist side of me, not the business side.
Yeah.
It for myself, it's frustrating. Like when you have something like I remember years ago, we got some rollerblades, some secondhand rollerblades, and one of the sets, it was horrible. And so first my friend was in them, and it's like, oh, you're just feeling the drag. But there's a difference between that when then you put on a nice set of rollerblades that you just glide along the sidewalk. And so I would say it's an experience that's similar to that. Like if you have any level of accomplishment as a musician, that could sound kind of bad to say it that way. What I'm trying to say is it's like if you enjoy playing music, I think that you'll benefit from having an in-tune instrument.
You want to play more.
You want to play more?
You want to play more. It's more a satisfying experience.
In one of the conversations I'll have sometimes if there's a piano that does have slipping pins, I'm like, okay, well, we can make some of this work. It's like, okay, it's for your children. Okay, great. Well, just be in tune with them. If this becomes the barrier to learning music, that's the issue. So I think that's the hard stop for me is it's like, when your instrument, whether it's tuning or its quality, become like the barrier to your learning, we have to deal with that. And if it's getting an electric instrument, that's fine.
Yeah.
But I learned on an electric instrument, and so I think for our family that worked well. But definitely after a decade and a half of playing that, I'm like, oh, I've grown accustomed to this sound, and it's not sterile, but it doesn't change. And there's something that's beautiful about an instrument that changes.
Yeah.
Other than that, you have to get it tuned often.
Right. So I can say this from I've played since I was 8 years old. I'm 51. I've been teaching for maybe 37 years. And just from my whole experience, if ever I get to choose what I want to play on, I always choose the acoustic. I have an acoustic, and I always choose. There's just an intimacy that you have with a real acoustic instrument that you don't have, with electronic. Now this serves me well for what I'm doing here, but if I ever have the choice to play on something, I'll choose the acoustic. Now, if I'm gigging, it's much easier just to lug around your electronic piano. But just for pure enjoyment, I'm going to play Bach on the acoustic. I'm not going to play it here. I'm not going to get near the enjoyment that I get. But an in-tune instrument, the instrument is not at its best if it's not well tuned. It's just, and you're missing something with the experience, the enjoyment of playing. Plus, I think it could also affect someone's ear. So if you have a really talented kid, that the formation of how they hear relative pitch and everything happens when they're a youngster. And if they're hearing sounds that are off, that are not in tune, that's sticking, whether you mean it to or not. That's going in there. I had an out of tune F when I was a kid growing up. I have perfect pitch, and I remember this kind of happening to me that forever I had that F, for whatever reason, it would never tune right, and it would have some kind of weird twangy sound to it. Nobody heard it but me, but it was just so weird. And I still hear an F that way to this day, the F below middle C. And so that's stuck in me. And so I really feel like if you have a kid growing up and they're talented, that really matters what they're hearing, because you don't just get it tuning and stuff. You have to hear it. You have to hear it on an instrument, hear people playing in tune before it starts to stick in you. And I think you're hurting yourself by not having an in tune instrument. that's my personal feeling.
Yeah, and here's a fun example to think I haven't thought before, but just imagine like comparing tuning to your keys. If slowly over time they started to kind of fall apart. Like Play-Doh, like this one's a little bit further. Like I think of muscle memory. It's like if you've ever played on a piano that has smaller keys, which you don't usually see unless it's like a really small portable piano. But I'm like, oh, that'll mess you up because you've been training on this one standard. And so from that perspective, I see it's like your brain. You're thinking about these pictures, your experiences, and all these different things that you're building. It's like you kind of want it to stay similar, hopefully.
Yeah. So. What defines a good piano tuner? So I guess we're going to kind of discuss. And in my experience, I never found a bad piano tuner. I found people that didn't care as opposed to people that really cared. What would happen, and you can can talk here in a minute, but I would have a tuner come in, and they'd get the middle right. They'd get that first octave, but as they went higher and lower, they cared less and less. Maybe that's because it's harder to hear, or maybe they just figured I'd play in the middle only, or I don't know what. But it would be more out of tune as they did octaves down. They didn't spend enough time, I didn't think, on the higher lower registers. Do you have anything to add to that?
So I'll probably approach it a little bit differently, just more from the technical perspective. Let me think.
Because it would actually be, the octaves wouldn't be in, it'd be as you went lower and lower.
I think probably, because what I run into is people have different standards. So if we're walking into someone who's like, I want my piano tuned, I don't play piano, but someone's going to come by for a performance, and they're going to do whatever.
Yeah.
And I did have one scenario where a piano was pretty old piano. Probably could have used a new set of hammers. Like, it needed a ton of work, but that's not practical to put so much work into an older instrument unless there's sentimental value and someone's like, I want to restore this piano. So I think ideally, a technician or a tuner would kind of zero in to say, well, what is the client wanting, in aligning with those goals? Like, do we just want it tuned and we're going for a cheap price?
Yeah.
Here's the tuning price I quoted you or whatever. And then going down the line from there, because, you can, most pianos I see, probably, 30, 50 years old on average. Just, there's a lot of old pianos out there. And I could probably do 2 days of work on each one of them.
Yeah.
But that's not what people generally need right then, because you don't want to dump a couple $1,000s into an instrument that's maybe worth not that much.
Right.
So I think a good tuner ideally will kind of zero in on that, and that can be it's a point of missing each other, and I think we can all do that. I do that with my wife every day, probably.
All of us.
But like having a conversation and being willing to like humble ourselves and say, hey, well, what about this? Can you tell me more about this, and so forth? Or even if as a piano player, this is what I want. Hey, how can I make my piano better? That's a good question to ask a tuner. Like, do you, beyond tuning, like, what do you see?
So you do work beyond tuning. You'll work on the
I do. And so
and...
I have, there's so much to learn. It's kind of like if you're a mechanic, it's like maybe tuning is kind of like you go get your tires done or something like that. It's not a perfect analogy or comparison, but then it's like, but then you go to like a machinist. Okay, we need to do a full overhaul, or someone who's rebuilding. It's like there's a large spectrum. But so I've been getting more into voicing and like more extensive repairs. I work out of a local shop.
Okay.
Here's it varies on my schedule, but so yeah, no, there's more that can be done. And I'm on the journey of figuring out, when you have an older piano, well, what's the best bang for buck that you can do to something to make an instrument perform as best as it can and practically. That's a personal goal that I've kind of set for myself on this journey.
Yeah. I love hearing you talk this way, because you'll communicate with the customer. What are you wanting? Because I can work really hard, but maybe you don't need that. Maybe you need something. Because I have, this grand in here. Then I have also just an upright in the shop that I'll bang, so I would want a different level of work on those too. So I'd love that you would talk about things that way and then adjust your price accordingly to what they needed. Because,
then it's like, okay, do you look for another piano? Because there's so many pianos that are free on Marketplace or for a couple $100s.
Yeah.
I have 4 pianos at my house right now that I've gotten all but one for free, it's like if you can get past the looks of a piano and you're just going for the sound, sometimes you can pick up like a steal, but then I'm also a technician, so that's an unfair advantage as a pianist, you could say.
Yeah. Neat. So if someone wanted to get a hold of you to do a tuning for you, or like you said, other work on the piano, how would they do that?
Yeah. So you can go to my website, wacopianos.com.
Okay.
Or Waco Pianos, just do a Google search, and that's what I come up. You'll see my face. I don't know if I remember my phone number yet.
Well, Waco Pianos, everybody remember that, wacopianos.com.
Yeah.
That's great. That's a great URL to have.
Yeah.
If you're a piano tuner in Waco, wacopianos, plural.com. Neat. And when someone schedules something, about how long does it take you to get out to them if they live in the area?
Yeah, no, if it depends. Right now, my schedule's fairly open. So I mean, if people, it's nice to have a phone conversation, if it's a day before. So it can be a day or two out right now. But in general, I would say.
That's pretty quick, actually.
but I would say, like, because if all of a sudden, like, I get hit with a wave, I would say, like, an expectation of, like, 3 to 5 days out.
Okay.
But right now, and I'm trying to figure out how to set my schedule up because I'll probably end up having some slots that are not, like, on the auto scheduler. So that way, if someone calls, I can be like, okay, well, we have this right here. But so, yeah.
3 to 5 days is awesome. I usually have to wait weeks if I call someone. In fact, I might have you do it if from now on. I think I would if I'm not going to do it myself. Now,
I could teach you. I guess.
I know something I was going to ask you. When you tune, do you use a lot of the new tuners are using the whatever, something they look at, like, and they're not listening. They're just looking at the dial. Do you do that, or do you do the beats when you hear it? So how do you do it?
So I first, until last year, did everything by ear, and I think now I do also have an electronic tuner. I was having a couple conversations with some local technicians, and they were encouraging me. They're like, "You should try it." And the argument was, it's like he's like, "I've done both ways, and what I have found is that this gets you 90, sometimes 95% of the way there."
Okay.
In a lot of circumstances, and we're going off of a gold standard, like what's
right.
Not that you can ever tune a piano perfectly,
right.
but and so he says for pitch raises, when things are really far out, he's like, this will just help save you 10, 15, 20 minutes, sometimes 30 minutes. And so I've started to do that, and it's just been a year that I've used an electronic tuner, but I generally go back through and listen, also by ear, just to see, do I like what it's doing? Because in most of the time, in most cases, I find that it does. But so I guess you could say a hybrid.
Yeah.
It's nice to have something that you can just kind of do an autopilot, and then you're like, wait, why is this not sounding good here? What can we do differently?
Yeah. I was kind of, I was like, I'm never going to use that. I'm just going to use my ear, kind of a pride thing. But it is numbers. It is very mathematical. And when the numbers match up, guess what? So does how you hear it. And I even have what they call perfect pitch, though it's not perfect. Nobody that has what they would say perfect pitch is not perfect. It's just I don't know what you describe it as, but anyway, I've been using like on my iPad, I'll have a thing, and I'll use that, and I found that I am closer and more satisfied just doing the numbers. And then, of course, like you said, I will listen to it. And sometimes I'll adjust it a little bit because I'm thinking, I like it. I know it's not exactly on the number, but to me, it's just ringing more true with me in this key with this. Anyway, so I can see how using that, and I'll use it even to tune down to A432. I was going to get into that a little bit because the standard is A440, the A above middle C, 440 hertz per whatever. Is it second? Is that what that is? But when you tune down, I don't know if you knew this. I was going to tell you this on the show. When you tune down to A432 and you do the harmonic series on C, 2 C's below middle C, the ratios between the notes in the harmonic series, C, C, G, C, E, G, B flat, and then as you go up, match the numbers in the Hebrew alphabet exactly, all the way up to the 22 letters that are in the Hebrew alphabet. The ratios are exactly match.
Wow.
And he's like, well, what do I do with that? Well, I have noticed in playing in A432 now, I feel like, I don't know, maybe God put that in there as some resonance with the human soul or something, because he made everything. And I feel at rest more. That's the best way I can describe it. When I play these pieces, it's more at rest. And I feel like when I go back to 440, then I'm a little more uptight. That's my own personal experience. But, have you ever had anybody want you to tune different than A440?
I haven't, but I will say that, between like just the fluctuations of humidity, there definitely have been pianos that have been all the way down to A430 and all the way up to A444. And so in most cases, I'll either have a conversation. Do we leave it here? Do we bring it on up? Just depending on what someone's goals are. But and then we had a little bit before the podcast talked about that. I'm like, I looked up a little bit about it. I'm like, I see there's a lot of information out there. Yeah. But I don't know if I've really established what it's a new topic for me.
Yes, it was for me too a few months ago, and I would have been skeptical. I was no, hey, 440, that's what we've always done. But I decided to try it, and it's there's something about it.
Yeah.
And again, people that have perfect pitch, they don't know how the things work. And I don't know because I have, certain feelings or whatever with different chords, different. So, when I hear music, it's not 1-4-5, though I can understand that.
Right.
I hear that chord. I hear that inversion.
Yeah.
And so many people will use the 1-4-5, the relative pitch, to figure out what's actually being played. But to me, I hear the actual pitches, and everything is like CEG is different to me than EGC. Different inversion, and there's a different personality for each combination that you could do.
Yeah.
And then so I'll say, okay, well, these are the notes. Then I'll do the theory after I hear. So as far as that goes, there was something about 432 that felt at rest.
Interesting
to me. There's that, and it's not that much. That's not that far.
And I forget the difference, but I know 8 beat. If you were to have the two notes side by side, having 8 beats per second of a difference, that is kind of. You wouldn't want to have.
Oh no, it'd be out of tune.
Yeah, very much so. But
somebody couldn't go. Oh, that's 842. Most people would.
Right. Yeah. No, that's interesting because I've found that this probably doesn't connect, but all the way other than from an experience standpoint. But I've kind of favored the key of F sharp.
Okay.
And I wonder if it's because most of the pianos that I've played on, they've never been voiced, and F sharp isn't people's favorite key to play in general.
Okay.
So I'm like, maybe there's just a little bit more tone in that key on those keys.
Yeah.
Or a softer or maybe more warm tone. I'm not sure if that's entirely true.
Let me kind of, to me, if I were to pick heavenly keys, or I don't want to say mystical because that sounds,
right.
But I don't know, spiritual, higher, whatever keys. And if I were to pick heavenly keys, F sharp would be one of them. D, a C sharp would be another. B, E a little bit, but those are to me, just from my own feel, and I think actually Liszt kind of said the same things about those certain keys. So people that have a pitch to that degree, they will kind of say the same things about certain keys. And F sharp is one of those keys that to me it's a kind of a toss up between F sharp and C sharp. Which one is more, it's just
angelic maybe.
Yeah, angelic is a good way to say it.
Yeah.
But I don't know. What do you think of that?
Yeah, I don't know. It makes me think about, honestly, of this is kind of a wild experience, but years ago, this was 2010, 2011.
Okay.
I was on a mission trip and we were in the UK, and on this mission trip, it makes me wonder, like, what I'm going to say something I heard. Was it an F sharp? I don't know if I know how to answer that, but
yeah.
But we were singing like a praise and worship song a cappella with our group, and we had great singers and we had horrible singers in the group, for lack of a better way of saying it. And we were singing, what is it? I think I've heard Michael W. Smith sing this song, but there's this part where it's like, it says, Jesus, Son of God.
Okay.
And we sing, and when we sing God, we all heard this chord. Basically, like if we were in a key of G, it'd be like a G2 major seventh or something like that.
Okay.
So you got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 notes to present the chord. And we all stopped singing. And someone said, did we just hear angels sing? and it's one of those things, like, even today, I'm like, did that happen?
Yeah.
Was that a dream?
But other people felt that way too.
Yeah, our whole group, we felt that way. And I'm like, for us to just happen upon a chord that needs 5 notes, I'm like, that's fairly unlikely. And you have people harmonizing, but then for the experience, but I'm like, that's kind of, so now I'm wondering, like, was it an F sharp?
Yeah. You know what I think is cool? The very basis of music, kind of the DNA of scales and harmonies are in the harmonic series. You play one note, then you have, the octave, then you have the fifth, then you have the thirds, which make a chord, the seventh of the chord, then you have the scales at the top.
Yeah.
They're closer together. And, you take the C harmonic series, the F harmonic series, and the G harmonic series. Well, those 3 chords cover all the notes in the C scale, and the primary chords you would play in C, 1, 4, 5. It's all there. It's like a map.
Yeah.
And then you carry it, circle of fifths, you carry it around, and then you end up with 12 tones. Okay. Right. And it's kind of interesting to me that there's 12 tones. Man didn't make that up. It happens mathematically. But there's 12 tones, and 12 is a huge number in the Bible. You know, 12 tribes of Israel. There's 12 months in a year. It's in Revelation several times. 12,000, but that anything of 12 seems to be a significant number in the Bible. So does the number 7. There's 7 notes in a scale, right? And then the last one, I guess, if you formed a chord, all chords are formed, tertian harmony on thirds.
Right.
So then you have the 3, which is maybe Father, Son, Holy Spirit. But those 3 numbers, 12, 7, and 3, are so prominent in music. That it's just fascinating to me that I feel like there's a lot more in music and the structure of it than we realize that's connected to the word.
Yeah.
That's how I feel about it anyway.
Yeah, no, it's really fascinating. Like I was saying just a little bit before, the more I look into the math of tuning or even the history, which I am not an expert in this part. Yeah. Most of my knowledge has been more like, how can I implement this to make a piano sound better?
Yeah.
But it's still fascinating to think about, like, how did the scale come about? And like, then there's the Pythagorean comma, and I'm like, okay, that looks complicated. or tuning, I think maybe this is a little bit more well known. The just mean scale, where you're taking, basically you're producing the scale from the harmonic series, and how then when you do that, of course, certain keys are going to sound better than others,
right? And
then that's where the equal temperament,
right? So explain real quick to people what equal temperament is, if you can. It's hard to.
I think that the simplest way that I've wrapped my mind around it, and also like communicates the idea, is it's like, because I used to lay tile in high school.
Okay.
Is you have square tiles in a not square room. So what do you do? And so equal temperament is kind of, you're doing your best job to make everything, like to spread the mistakes. They're not really mistakes, but from an implementation perspective, they feel like it.
Yeah.
To spread those mistakes out in such a way that your experience is that you don't notice them so much.
Yeah.
And so the equal temperament, essentially, you have, ideally, if you start like on F and A below middle C, you hear roughly 7 beats a second in a third that's sharp. And then as you chromatically walk up, it should slowly go faster and faster and faster.
Yeah.
Now, in a piano where there's the strings break to the bass strings, it's like there will be different attributes to those strings, and that won't always perfectly line up. But yeah, so it's that's in a nutshell.
Yeah, and I always like you said mistakes, and it's not a mistake. And I think the way to look at it is we can't retune like a violinist can. Like they play perfectly when they tune a D flat chord, and you have 2 violins and a viola. They're tuning D flat F perfectly.
Yeah,
and then they may modulate in the song, but then they tune that on the spot.
Right.
So they'll play an A a little bit differently according to what key they're in, just by their ear, to tune it perfectly. We can't do that on piano. We can't change, but we have an advantage that we have, all the keys there at once. So it's just kind of an accommodating thing, because our instrument can't retune and change for whatever key we're in at that moment.
Yeah.
So it's more of a limitation on the instrument than it is a limitation on music.
Right. No, and I think, like the goal is, it's like, how can you make an instrument sing? Or it's like, you think about, like, even from a performance level, like all these different pieces come together, and you're like, that was a moment.
Yeah.
Like, I'm going to remember that moment. And I'm like, well, how can you make an instrument ready for those moments?
Yeah.
And because it's like some instruments I sit down and I'm like, not that I'm a great jazz player, but you just play a couple of chords, you're like, okay, I'm a jazz player because I played a couple seventh chords.
Yeah.
But it's like some things I'm like, this feels more like a jazz instrument. This feels more like a classical instrument, or just like the emotion that I'm experiencing as I start to tickle the ivories, I guess you could say. But and so more than the perfection of all of the tuning or everything, it's like, does it work? It's like, that takes you so far, but then what do you do with it?
Yeah.
I don't know. It's kind of like the bursting at the seams, kind of, you do as good of a job, and then you're like, okay, here we go.
Well, it's obvious that you really care about music, and of course, that's where it starts. You care about music and people that are making music, so you want their instrument to be the best it possibly can. And when you go from that standpoint, it's not just a job, it's not just something you're doing to make money, and how many can I fit in a day. You really care, and that matters to me way more than any other criteria for what your skill is. And I didn't know that you actually worked on the piano, did other things besides the tuning. So that's kind of cool that you can do that. And if you have a shop, so if somebody would need a lot of work, you could get their piano to your shop and you can work on it there.
Well, I wouldn't at this point. I'm not. I mean, it would be a case by case depending on what something needed. I'll do more of light, like action reconditioning. So, like a very common issue on older Yamahas is they have these little return springs that will help the hammer go forward, and there's little cords in there, and they become brittle and they break, and so then it's like you're not going to be as responsive. So that kind of thing, I would bring that back to my house, and then I would work on that.
Yeah.
And then it just goes down the line, kind of like the whole. I'm definitely not a rebuilder at this stage in my life, but I do have a piano that I might experiment on. It's a 1926.
Yeah. Okay.
So we'll see how far down that road we get, but the going for tuning, repair, and then I'm trying to get to a place where it's like, how do we refurbish this piano? Okay. And generally that happens over time.
And what let's say if I was to have you just tune this one in here, what's the price on that generally?
Yeah.
Can you give me?
So what I do is I do 165 for a tuning, and that's like a 2-hour service appointment.
If someone's not spending 2 hours, they're not spending enough time.
If you get it tuned twice a year, then it might be, because it's like, the fastest I've ever tuned a piano is an hour and 15 minutes.
Yeah.
There are people who've gone faster. But some of that's like if you like for those concert pianos that are tuned weekly,
right? That matters.
That might be where you don't actually have to set the temperament. You just kind of go through. It's like, okay, checking everything. Okay, this is out here, up in usually probably the top end.
Yeah.
But yeah, no. So because I often find that there's other things like if it's an old upright, the hammers are really worn. There's a couple tricks you can do to soften the tone just a little bit. So it's not like some people call it granny voicing.
Okay.
But
I haven't heard that before. Okay.
But I mean, the smallest things can change the tone, once you have it tuned, of course. Yeah. But so 165, and then with tax, it comes out to be just shy of 180 and that's the starting spot, because at that point, maybe that's enough, or if you need something else, 6 months, a year later,
Right. So the more often, it can be cheaper, less money, right? Because you don't have to spend as much time on it.
Yeah, in general, more enjoyment for sure.
Yeah, and if someone's piano's way out, I've experienced this. They have to tune it a couple of times.
Right.
If it's way off, right?
Yeah. So in a pitch raise, let's say we're at something like A430 and we're wanting to go up to A440, or just having that large of a distance to cover. Depending on the piano, you might have to go to 2, 3, in some cases 4 times. And so generally what I'll do if someone's like, I don't play that much, as I say, after having that conversation again, I'll do 2.5 passes and say, how does this sound? The top end is still, honestly, to my ear, a little bit flat. But, once again, aligning that price point with my desire for perfection, and kind of picking that. At least that's how I've been doing it. But yeah, multiple tunings definitely. So you put your new guitar strings on. How many times are you going to tune that?
That's right. Yeah, that's a good analogy there, because they tune it every time they pick it up.
Yeah,
and we tend to just not think about our pianos. Well, Josh, it's been great talking to you today.
Yeah,
and again, to get hold of Josh to do your piano tuning, Waco area and surrounding areas, WacoPianos.com.
That's correct.
And they can schedule something with you right there, or do they just get the phone number to call you? How do they?
Yeah, you can. And there's on the option it's like different appointment lengths, but just go for the 2-hour one, or you can give me a call or shoot a text. My number's on there as well. I'd tell you it now, but I'd probably get it wrong.
Excellent. WacoPianos.com. Let Josh come tune your piano for you and fix you up. It has been great talking to you guys. We'll see you on the next one. Go ahead, Carol.